Welcome to the Personal Podcast, where we get to meet the real person behind the professional. I'm your host, Charlotte Nichols, and I'm really thrilled to be joined by Astrid Blake today. Astrid is creative and holistic consultant and mentor. Astrid, what's the most harrowing experience that you've been through?
Big breath on that. Yeah, it's hard even to get the words out sometimes, but losing our daughter, Lyra, at full term. And it was, I think, working for myself for so long, I was just so excited to be a new mum. And we'd kind of waited and waited and waited because we were so taken over by our work, I suppose, because we worked together, Simon and myself. And I'd put it off for such a long time because I was so frightened of not knowing, am I allowed to have a baby? Have I got time? Have I got the money? I just wanted to know that it was all going to be as perfect as we could make it. So I took the big leap and thought, well, let's go for it. You know, life's never perfect. When is the right time? So getting pregnant was really amazing because that was something that I'd always dreamt of, being a mum. And so during that time, all my heart and focus was on the excitement of being a mum. And I think during the pregnancy, I did all the things that I thought were just the thing to do as a mum. I read all the books, got the doctor's appointments, everything. And I'm quite an organised kind of person. And with my business, I'd managed to kind of get some extra help in, made never-ending to-do lists, really, so that I was super planned, super organised. But nothing prepared me for that. It was just absolutely so shocking. And I mean, I'd spoken to mums and, you know, read the books. And I remember actually reading through one of the books and there was a chapter on stillbirth. And I thought, oh, I don't need that book. I don't need that chapter. I don't need it. And now looking back on it, I just couldn't believe that, you know, that was going to happen. But yeah, that is, I mean, I've had some other kind of quite traumatic experiences actually, but for me, that I would say is something that I would never wish for anyone to go through.
Horrendous. I mean, it's every pregnant person's worst fear. Can you even come close to describing how you felt in that moment, or at what stage did you find out?
Well, I'd been working right up to the point where I was, you know, in my last week. And I remember my consultant had said, oh, you don't really need to come in the last week. We don't really need to see you anymore. Everything's so brilliant, you know, everything's going well. And then in the last week, I suddenly started feeling a bit not great. It was January. I felt like I had a bit of a cold. So I went in to the hospital and I waited and waited to see someone. It wasn't my consultant. And each time I went in it was like quite a long drawn out wait because of the waiting times in hospitals. So I'd walk down this quite long kind of path to the car park on my own from the top of this car park, quite heavily pregnant, 9 months, and have like hours and hours of waiting to see someone. And then I was told, oh, you're just worrying a bit. You don't need to kind of worry. Just go home, you'll be fine. And they'd say, oh, is your baby moving? I'm like, yep. And then I did that twice again. And I said to my husband, I feel unsure, unsettled. And I was just like really, I suppose the last time I went in, I did see my consultant. I was in tears. And she said, I think you're just getting worried for nothing. But anyway, I did go home and I remember getting on my laptop thinking, well, I'm just going to do a bit of work here, just settle my thoughts and then I did feel like there was something different happening. And I actually from what they say, you go in when you get some like show or something. So I did that. And that's exactly when they said, sorry, there's no heartbeat. So I had been in not long before that and been sent home. And I just remember at that point in time, like the world just literally collapsed. I felt like the whole world just stopped and literally went black. I remember feeling like I was just dropped into this like void. And I remember falling down onto my knees and just clinging to the side of the bed. And I think the lady who'd like said, sorry, she just walked out of the room. And I think she'd gone to find someone to help us. But it just felt like forever, just sort of clinging to the side of the bed. I think I was like praying. I was just in total shock. It was like the past had completely collapsed. There was no going back. And like all that hope and joy and happiness literally collapsed as well. Like the whole future literally just vanished in front of my eyes. So it just felt like it went on forever. And eventually somebody did come back in. And they're like, well, we better check how far you are with, contractions. And I think then they just said, well, they checked and they went, well, you're fully dilated. You're going straight into labour now. And so it was just going straight into giving birth, basically. So my husband was by my side the whole way through it. And I remember a midwife just sort of in the corner taking notes. But I think it was just became a blur, really, because I just thought, I just have to get through this. There's no way back, and there's only a way forward now. But I remember at that time, I just felt like there was something just pulling me through this. I didn't feel like I felt like everything collapsed, but I also felt there was something there that was just like a inner strength or something that just pulled me through that experience. In that exact present moment in time, there was nothing else to do.
Oh, I have no words. It just sounds so horrific.
I mean, I remember a midwife saying 1 in 10. I don't know if that's actually a true statistic. I mean, afterwards I did a lot of research, and it is so much more common, and so many people go through it. Not so many, but a lot of people do. A lot of women do. A lot of families do. And, it's something I'd not really heard anyone talk about. But since then, I've heard so many people. And not just stillbirth at full term, but miscarriages, all sorts of things that families go through, which is so painful. And yeah, I mean, it was just a complete. I remember when I did deliver Lyra, eventually the consultant who was my consultant came in after some time, and she just looked at me and she went, "This is a catastrophe." And I don't think I had any words. I just had none. There wasn't any word I could think, I was just, I think, just in another world at that point of time. I don't know where I was. I just felt completely broken, shattered. It definitely takes you to another place.
An awful place. I just can't imagine how horrific the labour experience was. I mean, it's never pleasant at the best of times. And you said there's almost felt like a higher force pulling you through it.
Well, I think mothers, they have that instinct, obviously, to get through whatever they're faced with. Some, have a perfect, very easy birth. I know my auntie had 5 children, so it's so easy. And others have very traumatic. I know even my own mum, talking about it, she had a traumatic birth of me. I think she was in labour for 2 days and they didn't realise that I was breech. And so she'd been like struggling and struggling, and not till another midwife had come on duty and had seen what the problem was that they got me out, feet first. And she, that was life-threatening for her, life-threatening for myself. I don't remember it. She does. But no.
It's almost like it shouldn't be so difficult, And again, society paints this picture that it's a time of hope and joy, and yeah, it's not often the case. But I didn't realise 1 in 10.
That I just remember a midwife just saying that to me quite sort of very matter-of-factly.
Yeah.
And at the time, I was just, is that true? Can't believe it. I don't believe you. Was that in that particular hospital? I don't know. At the time afterwards, I looked and looked and looked for so much information. I visited other doctors. I went just absolutely, I need to know. But the thing is, we never ever knew what it was.
But almost just to throw a stat at you
Yeah.
to justify your pain. Oh, it's okay, 1 in 10. And I'm sure it wasn't said quite that blasé, but it's not what you want to hear in that moment. But did you take up any inquiries with the hospital based on the fact that you'd been several times that week with doubts and you were dismissed?
I think at the time we were just way too in shock to cope with anything. I did go in and see my consultant later on, as you would do anyway. And I asked, and she said, oh, your baby was so perfect, it would have only happened like maybe minutes, hours. There was no
Always makes it worse, though, almost to hear that.
I mean, when I held her, she was the most perfect baby. I remember pulling down the blanket off, she was like wrapped up around her face, and I pulled it down and she had the dimple my husband has in his chin. And I looked at her feet and I thought, God, they look like my toes. And I just remember staring at her for so long, just drinking in every single detail. And I think that's the thing that really, just as a new mum, you just drink in that absolute pure beauty of that baby in your arms. And I think I had to do that for as long as I could. And I think the hardest thing was then, we did stay in the hospital for quite a long time. I don't really remember it. I remember family coming and seeing her and holding her and my husband there. And we did stay overnight. I think my husband went out of the hospital to take the baby seat back to the car on his own. And just facing the world again on his own with this empty baby seat when you're walking past the ward full of people with babies. And there wasn't anywhere particular that we were asked to go or anything. We just stayed, I think, that night. And I remember then we had to just leave her there and walk away. And I remember just that feeling of not wanting to let go. And I think that is something that stayed with me for way too long, because it's that feeling that it's not the right time to let go.
No.
As a mum, to walk away, feeling completely, you'd had that lovely bump and be nurturing it for 9 months and nurturing that soul inside you. And then just to walk away, feeling physically empty. And yeah.
How do you even start to deal with that grief?
I think when we drove back in the car, I remember feeling just completely spaced out. Obviously, I'd just been through labour not that long ago. I remember just looking down the street and feeling completely different. Like, it sounds weird. I probably never said it to anyone before, but I remember looking at people and there were like flickers of light. Just these flickers of light, beings around me. And I thought, I'm back in the world, but I don't really feel the same anymore. I don't think I'll ever feel the same. And I felt Lyra was there with me, but physically not, obviously. So it was a very strange feeling. And that just lasted for so long. I felt like I couldn't really hear sounds. It was a very surreal experience. I remember coming back to our flat. We lived in London, and a small flat with a little cot in the corner of our bedroom. And just coming back in, thinking I've been thrown into this other world, and it's not the world I was hoping or expected. It was literally thrown from joy to the other spectrum, complete grief and complete despair. So it was a complete turn of all the happiness to the opposite, basically. I kind of remember coming round, sort of, and the first things I really heard sound-wise were like birds. Sounds strange, but we had a tiny garden in the back of our flat. And I just remember the feeling of connecting back to earth, I suppose. And it was the sounds of birds around. And it was quite comforting just to kind of hear something normal, I suppose. But it had just been such a, I think the shock just knocks you out of yourself.
Were you offered support?
Actually, I had to look back because at the time I did write a diary. It was such a great help for me to do that because I felt like I was still talking to Lyra, and it was a way I could do that. But I remember thinking, what do I do? And we phoned the hospital and they didn't have anything. So luckily some friends kind of helped find someone we could speak to. But I think the first person we spoke to was through my sister-in-law had found someone, but I thought, gosh, it's quite expensive. I know it sounds awful, but, we were always worried about that kind of thing. And in London, the price is so we only went once to this lady. But then somebody else I met through my work or through my shop that I had at the time, there was a man that she said, you should speak to him. He's very spiritual, and I think he's a very good person to speak to, and he won't, he has special charges and stuff for, like, if you're not able to pay that much. Anyway, so I did speak to him, and he was really good. But I think the most I got from that, actually, as well as seeing him, was the place, because it was in this, I'd get the bus down to High Street, Kensington, and it was somewhere I'd never been before, but it was behind all the hustle and bustle of the High Street, and it was just like, I think it wasn't a nunnery, it was something like that. So it was this beautiful, like, quiet building, and we would sit in a little room and talk, but afterwards I would go and sit in a chapel on my own, and that peace and quiet, I think it was just, again, connecting into that stillness and having that away from that busyness of life. That was really like a saviour for me, just to find that peace and somewhere special. So as much as I did do some counselling, I think it was just also that finding that the peace that I needed at that point in time, the space.
Through the peace and space, did you feel like you could connect with Lyra on a spiritual level?
I definitely felt I was connecting to something. I would definitely I know I'd be praying for her and asking her guidance, because I felt like almost at one point the roles were reversed. I was almost like the child and she was almost like the mother. I remember seeing this children's illustration, and it really sort of, I looked at it, I thought, gosh, that's like Lyra and me. I know it sounds a bit weird, but it was this beautiful, watercolour of a lady in a meadow with a sort of flower crown on her head, and she was handing this lovely red poppy flower to a little girl sitting in the meadow. And I thought, I just felt this connection that was her passing something on to me. So it was quite a strange feeling, but I felt she's guiding me, definitely, in some way or another.
And did you have to start organising a funeral?
So that basically my a brother-in-law, one of my brother-in-laws did that for us.
Okay.
Because I couldn't do anything. I couldn't think. I couldn't do any practical things, really. I didn't want to eat. I remember my husband, he's a really good cook and he loves making food. He would, if it wasn't for him cooking and just literally giving me food, I don't think I would have bothered. I just didn't have that want. I'd been so happy nurturing my body with good food all the way through the pregnancy. I suddenly thought, what's the point? I don't want it anymore. I just thought, I just couldn't take anything in. So people reaching out and helping was just the best thing, because I just didn't have that in me to do anything really. But yes, the funeral again was quite surreal. I remember I read out a poem and I was holding this lamb that I'd bought, that I wanted to have her in her cot, and it had this like musical chord, and I used to play that like every night. And I had that in my hand and had a bunch of snowdrops because it was January, and I just kept staring at these snowdrops and just words came out my mouth, but I just didn't really feel very connected to anything. I remember seeing just this tiny little coffin, and I think the people, they didn't realise it was a stillbirth, but I think, they did make it extra special once. It was like, it was beautiful, but it was just, again, so surreal.
Something you shouldn't have to do.
So I think we kept her ashes, and for a long time I didn't know what to do, where to put them. I was so torn. Do I take some of them to Norway, where my mum's from, and I have special kind of memories of, and somewhere I wanted to be with her and imagined like swimming in the sea with her and stuff. And I thought, I'd like to have some of them there. But I think it took a while to kind of settle, like, and then allow knowing what to do. But we took them back up north here, and they are in the churchyard where we were married and where our two children after that were both baptised. So it's a special place, and she's there.
One thing I'd imagine was, everything's difficult, but one thing that was really difficult are well-wishers, that perhaps aren't close enough to know the full story, but just saying, oh, and how's your new baby? How did you deal with that?
I think that is really, really tough, because I had a shop at the time and people would come in and had seen me obviously pregnant. So my husband was the first one to sort of go back and be in the shop on his own. I did have some people booked in or like rotated in to help, because I knew I was going to maybe be at home with my baby. So I had organised a couple of weeks where people were helping me, but then after that I really had to get back in myself. And I remember people coming in and I was just so terrified, because I thought, they're going to ask me, they're going to say, how's your baby? And there's nothing I can say. I can't lie. I can't not tell them. So it was just like this fear every day, like, who's going to come in and what am I going to say? I don't want to upset them, because they're going to sort of feel shocked. So I kept having this fear, like every time somebody walked in the door, what can I say? So the reactions though were so like outstanding. Like, so many people who I didn't really know that well would just be just so kind. And I felt bad because I'd kind of broken this bad news to them, but they were so kind, and just such kind people. And some would sometimes drop a card later on with a message, and some came back with flowers, just with stories as well of somebody that they knew also had gone through something similar. It was just outstanding how much they'd share. And that really meant a lot to me, because I needed to talk to people. I needed to know I wasn't alone. And there's so many people who really offered a lot of help, strangers I didn't know. And then even, there was a lady that used to come by the shop. She wasn't a customer, but we'd always say hello because she lived around the corner. And one day she dropped this letter in. And it was just so sad. She'd lost twins, boys. And I think her husband left her. She was quite an elderly lady, but these stories that people carry around, and you just don't know.
Mm-hmm. Do you have an idea for a podcast in your head? If so, we can record, produce, and promote that podcast to bring it to life. Contact us today to find out how. That's the exact reason for doing this podcast.
Yeah.
You just never know through all the superficial small talk, particularly in the business world, what people are truly facing behind that smile.
Exactly. I think she'd been a lawyer with a career, and just all of these things. There's so many people that would open up and share their stories, and I think that really helped me incredibly.
So was it almost a blessing that you had to return to the shop rather than staying at home? Or I can imagine that was difficult too.
Yeah, I think I was angry. I was like, this isn't where I wanted to be. I was so angry. I remember one day I got the samples in from India that I'd been getting all ready before the birth, and they came in. I just looked, I was so angry. I thought, I do not want to be here. I should be at home with my baby today. This is not where I want to be. And I think I didn't have so much anger. I think my husband had probably more anger than I did. But I do remember feeling that was a point where I started feeling angry. And I thought, this is not what I wanted. I wanted to be a mum. And I felt like I was still. And that was the other strange thing. I would walk out the door and I'd think, nobody can see that I'm a mum. I don't have my baby's not here, but I know I'm a mum.
Yeah.
And it was a very strange feeling, because you'd see mums with the prams pushing them around, and you just think, that should be me. I was there, but I'm not. So it was a very strange feeling. I wanted to be away because it was too painful sometimes to sort of be around. But then I didn't want to be completely on my own either. So it was this kind of mixed feeling of, just get me away, and then I don't want to be on my own. So it was just a very difficult one.
I'm in awe of how you can speak about this so articulately. Have you had therapy to help you process these thoughts?
I've always had a thing where if I have any emotional or even physical thing, I would go and see someone like a holistic practitioner. And I did go, I think eventually when I had the sort of strength, and I went back and probably had some cranial sacral therapy, and those things really helped me personally, because I know that the body and the mind, well, I've learnt more now, are so closely related. And when you have a huge shock, the processing is so important. I think for years, I did actually throw myself back into work, which was, I felt like I was going back to something that I really wasn't anymore. And I was trying to think about it the other day. It's almost like a new version of yourself has emerged, but I feel like I tried to go back, and my body kept telling me, you're not that anymore. You have to change. You have changed. So I think the therapies really help release and help work through that. on a sort of level more subconscious and visceral, the level that the body still knows it's holding a lot of trauma and trying to release it in a way that you can move out of it and make something better come of it.
Mm-hmm. And do you feel that you've gone through that now? And are you ever through something like this?
I think it took about, sounds a long time, but about 10 years. I honestly think I probably had like some post-traumatic stress. I don't know. I never got diagnosed. I never really asked the doctors about that kind of thing. I think
like, how could you not have it?
I think it just from reading, and I did a lot of reading and a lot of research. Later on, I thought, oh my God, that's me. Because I used to just involuntarily play this record like of that moment in time over and over in my head. And I had no like wish to do that. It just literally would come out and just keep going through my mind. And then later on, when I read, what your mind thinks, your body thinks it's going through.
Yes.
So if you keep telling yourself that traumatic story over and over again, your body thinks you're going through that. And I think actually prior to having Lyra, I think I was on a verge of burnout. I don't think that affected my pregnancy, but I think I was so exhausted just mentally, physically from running a business and thinking I had to do everything.
Yeah.
Had to be everything and had to, have the perfect, answer to everything. I was the one to sort of like not control, but I was the one that everything fell on my shoulders, really.
Yeah, I can relate to that.
So I think even prior to being a mum, I felt pretty, drained. But I always thought, well, I'm strong, I'm healthy. I always kept myself fit and healthy. But I think just taking on too much sometimes and not saying no and just wanting everything to be perfect and perfect for my customers, perfect for the buyers, everything. So I think I let go a lot of that. I was like, you just had to. I almost felt like just ripping up my to-do list, like throwing them in the bin, and that's it. I'm not going to push myself that hard ever again. But I do, we all have standards, and you just want to be, do things well, and that's how I am. And that's what I wanted to be as a mum, and hopefully, I did go on and have two more children.
How were their pregnancies?
So I was just again looking back on my book, my diary, and I think I had this dream. It says in my diary of someone in my dream saying, "You're ready now." A lady in my dream said, "Right, you're ready to try again," because I was terrified. I was so afraid because we never really found out. They just said sorry. And I thought, well, what can I do? What can I do to stop this ever happening again? How, what can I do? And they went, there's nothing you did wrong. And I just thought, well, what can be done? So they did actually, I had to have another consultant. I couldn't cope with going back to the same
It's
one.
understandable.
And he was amazing. And then I had two amazing midwives. They were NHS. They were just the most amazing people. I remember going back into the hospital and I just was in the room waiting to meet one of them, and I was on my own, and I think I don't know what panic attacks are really, but I think that's what I had. I literally couldn't sit in the room any longer, and I tried to like almost break out of the ward where they have all those locks on doors. I was like banging on the door, let me out, I can't sit in here, just get me out of here. And eventually she did come and she calmed me down. And I think that was one of the hard things, that it was just sitting waiting in the hospital. So they very kindly said, well, you can come and wait in this quieter area and not be around all of the noise of, like, there was other mums with lots of babies, and just the whole feeling. I could not cope with it. So they were amazing. They were always really hands-on, and I think I slightly missed that in the first pregnancy. I didn't get so much hands-on that feel, and I think that gave me huge comfort. And even in the night, I remember I used to panic thinking, is my baby moving, you know? And my husband would just drive me to the hospital, and I'd get put on a monitor and sit and wait and listen to the heartbeat until that panic subsided again. So that went on throughout the pregnancy, with my son. And we ended up having an elected cesarean 2 weeks early because they said we don't want to leave it to the very last. And the other thing was that I have had a spinal injury, which I had in my 20s, where I shattered my lower lumbar.
Oh, goodness.
So all the time they're like, well, we don't know if you can have the injection in your spine if you need one. So in the end, instead of that, I went under a general. So I wasn't even awake when my son was born. Simon was the first one to hold him. And then when I came round, put him there. And I was just, again, it was just another world where your heart opens again. It is that heart opening. So I think with Conrad, he was an amazing baby, but actually when I took him home, we had, the people that come around, the ladies that come to check that you're breastfeeding and doing everything right. I said, I don't think my milk's coming in. I really don't. I don't feel like it's happening. I don't know what it's meant to feel like, but I just don't. They're like, oh, you're fine. Keep trying, keep trying. And he was crying and crying and crying. I thought, no, this doesn't feel right. So Simon was like, call one of the ladies that have been helping you. So I did, and she said, just get here now in the car. So I went round, and she said, oh, your milk's not in, and he's desperate for like milk. And I remember she just mixed up this bottle and just put it like straight in, and I was like, felt so relieved, because I knew that there wasn't something quite right, but I was just being told, just keep trying with the breastfeeding, you'll be fine. But it wasn't fine. So even then, I thought, gosh, if I hadn't picked up the phone and got and asked for more help, what would, he was just tiny because he was newborn, but he needed food right there and then. So that was a shock, and I spent some more time in hospital with him until he got up to weight. But that was a really amazing bonding experience, actually, because I was just pocketed away, no thing to think about apart from me and him, and waiting till he got back up to weight and it was okay to bring him home again. But that was just a few days of just absolutely amazing.
Just such a contrast to what you'd previously experienced there. Yeah. Did you feel, again, Lyra's presence in that moment?
Well, I always said, oh, Lyra, I hope you don't mind if you... And she was like, I think that's what I was scared of. It was like, is this okay to move forward? And I think that's when, looking back, I'd obviously had a dream. And that was like a signal for me from her or from somewhere. Because I did slightly feel that guilt of like wanting to move forward again. But I always thought, well, she will be there for them. Her brother and sister, she's their big sister.
How do you keep her memory alive with the children?
Well, they know all about her.
Good.
And I think they just see her as another, obviously she's not physically here, but she's there. She is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And after going through what you've experienced, do you wish society perhaps altered their views on, what we call a stillborn, stillbirth. Is there anything that you want to change or address?
I do feel strongly that the emotional side of what people go through, families, not just the mother, the whole family, the husband, the grandparents, other members if they've got other children, I think is that emotional support. Because you can measure, say a break or something, but the emotional thing that happens is you can't see it. So it's very difficult to kind of measure it, I suppose. But it's so I remember reading a letter. One lady said, I think she'd lost her boy, and she said it just ripped my soul apart, and that's it. And just because we can't see that doesn't mean it needs help.
And there's no medication for that sort of pain.
No. The only thing is pure love. Mm. And that's the thing that I learned the most from that whole experience is, I think as I went through the healing process and years later, probably 10 years later, I'd done, like I mentioned, the Reiki and different things like that. I mean, I trained in Reiki myself. I've always had a connection to something that we can't see that can help guide us to heal. So I've always had that belief. And I think, 10 years down the line, I think there was someone who said, I teach meditation. I was like, oh, that sounds like something I really need right now. And it didn't happen right there and then, but later on, again, it came up and I said, right, I'm coming. When are you doing the next session? I said, right, it's going to be this weekend or whatever. I said, right, I'm booking myself out of doing anything then, and I'm going to go and do it. And I sat for 3 days, I suppose, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I had no expectation. And I think that was the best thing I could have done. I didn't research. I didn't kind of wonder what might happen. I just went and I sat, and I thought, it's the first time I just sat on my own. Being a mum, you don't get those breaks, do you?
No.
So I sat on my own. Well, not on my own. There was 2 teachers and 2 or 3 other people there. And I remember I thought, this is when Lyra's asking me to do this almost. Mm-hmm. And I thought, right, I'm going to go through this process of the little steps they were teaching us. And I think on the final day, one of the meditation teachers said, most important thing is to let go. And I felt so cross. I went, how dare you say let go? You've no idea what I've been through. I don't want to let go of anything. And I think that now, looking back on it, it was like my ego talking. This is my story. I don't want to let go of anything because this memory's so precious to me. And I went, okay, I'm just going to go back into the meditation that they've asked us to do. And through that, I don't know whether it was 20 minutes, 40 minutes, I'm not quite sure. Like every emotion just kind of came up. And I thought, I'm just going to keep going. I'm going to ride this out. I'm going to keep going. And right at the very last sort of phase, it felt like this incredible light just shining right through my head. I thought, God, this must be light coming in through the windows or something. It was like burning through my head. And then I eventually opened my eyes, and the meditation teachers were like, just talking and saying something about love and compassion. And I thought, right, this is it. I have to let this out now. So I spoke about Lyra and losing her, and I could feel myself like burning. And then suddenly this huge weight, like it was the heaviest weight I felt in my whole life. I can't even explain the weight. It felt like it was sucking me down into the earth. I thought, God, the room's collapsing in on me. I don't know what's happening. Is everybody else feeling this? I was sort of looking around. And then I sort of stopped talking, and I said, well, the love and compassion of everybody that supported me through this is what got me through. And suddenly that weight just lifted. It just absolutely left. It was maybe been stuck in my body for so long. And I remember getting up and everybody just getting, saying their goodbyes and what have you. I thought, oh my God, I feel so different. And since that day, those shocking memories don't replay in my mind at all. I just have a loving memory. And I think it allowed me to let go of something without the fear of losing that love. It just, all that was left was pure love. Nothing else mattered. It was just that. And I did not have to fear anything anymore. It was pure and it was perfect. And it was a love that never, ever ends. And it just felt so amazing. I just thought, what's happened? This is incredible. That weight that I didn't even know I was carrying just lifted.
Sounds such a profound moment.
It was strange because it was all internal. It was all going on inside. Nobody knew. I don't think anyone, oh God, I'm getting sucked down by this huge weight. It was just something inside that was happening. I know it sounds odd, but it just, I don't know. I feel like it might have saved my life. It felt so like this weight just literally dropped out of my body, out of my whatever it was. And I think I just had that huge, from that sadness, been carrying so much of that for so long. And I think it was something that just helped release it. So I think I was drawn to do that. And it wasn't something I'd been searching for. It was just a feel that I desperately needed to do this.
Yeah.
And it really helped. And I think even in lockdown, I was so pleased I had that. I could do that meditation every day. And I think another thing was I felt guilty if I ever sat down before. And I thought, I'm sitting down and I'm doing this. And honestly, it just makes everything so much easier. Like giving myself that 20 minutes at the beginning of a day, things just go better, just so much easier, so much more how they should go, like without force.
Yeah, I need to be better at that. Again, you sometimes think, oh, I haven't got time for that. That's almost lazy to sit there for 20 minutes and just think, I've got things to do rather than think about doing them.
Yeah.
But it does help.
Well, maybe it doesn't suit everybody, but there's different ways of meditating because some people might not feel comfortable just sitting, but there's other ways as well.
Like walking, perhaps.
Yeah. Or something that gets you into a flow kind of state.
Yes. And so did that experience inspire you to do what you do now?
I think another strange feeling that I had after we lost Lyra, a few months after we went to Cornwall and we went on this beautiful, just walk, just me and Simon together. And I think it was the first time I'd been out of London in that experience. And I remember looking at, along this little path that we were going along, just at these tiny little flowers just all around, that these little daisies, and had this really strange feeling that I was looking at them through Lyra's eyes, like it was something she was seeing for the first time, I wasn't imagining, I think it was just a feeling how a newborn looks at the world with such innocent eyes.
Yes.
And I had that feeling that I was experiencing all of the beauty for her, or because she hadn't opened her eyes. She hadn't seen the world where we live. And I do feel that was a very strange feeling at that time. Again, in London we were, go to parks and things, but I think just looking at flowers, I remember all the flowers that people had given us and staring at them. And I think it was like that wonder that you have when you stare at your newborn. It was almost transferred to nature. And there was a connection there that felt like everything's connected, that we're all connected. And I think that she gave me that. She helped me see again like that, in that very innocent state that we're born with.
Yeah, but we take for granted.
I think we just get so much that kind of comes in front of our eyes that it's just like layering. And it was strange. I had that feeling the other day. I was talking to someone about my eyesight, saying how bad it was. And I was glad that I'd got my eyes tested before COVID and lockdown, because I get a pair of glasses and I could wear them and read. Otherwise, I would have been pretty stuck. But then I thought, go to the opticians and you get those glasses and they put those lenses in front to try and get your eyes to see properly.
Yes.
I feel like it's almost the reverse. We kind of are born with the pureness of seeing things, and then more lenses get put in front.
That's a really good way of looking at it, literally.
And then it's our job to almost remove them again.
Yeah.
It's just something that popped into my mind the other day when I was just, I get these thoughts and I think, yeah, that is a bit like that. It's a way to kind of maybe explain that feeling. So, yeah, I don't know where we started, but I think there's lots of ways, and I think nature definitely was of great comfort, beauty, connection, peace.
And you help people now to rediscover their creativity and intuition through nature.
I think that's one way, because it's a very gentle way. It doesn't ask you anything, really. You can just go and be. And I know sometimes to go for a walk for exercise, which is brilliant, but sometimes you can go for a walk and just chill a bit with it.
Yeah, and be mindful.
Yeah, because I know you can rush around and even just go, I've done my walk, I've got that out the way, kind of thing. I think just being a designer as well, I've always looked at nature for inspiration, whether it's patterns on leaves, colours, light and dark, the shadows. And when you start to really just go into that zone, it is a calming influence on your mind, on your body. Everything just starts to settle, I find. I mean, obviously, depends where you are. In a big thunderstorm, it might not be so settling. But even with dramatic things like that, you can find a calm place. And I think that's what it is. It's finding a moment where you can just be in that calm place.
I agree. And there's medicine in nature, not just in the herbs and plants, but in the spiritual and emotional health, I believe, as well.
Yeah.
Again, we take it for granted. We're too busy rushing around from day to day, from technology, laptop to smartphone, and we miss out on it.
I know, I think it is. I mean, even living in the city, I would always, love going to the park, always. And even with, design, influences of nature in the house, if you can't get out, there's always a way to bring it in as well.
Yeah.
And even I remember, like, when I had my back accident, I was like bedbound for a long time because I had a spinal fusion. Wow. I shattered my lower lumbar.
How did you do that?
That was in my 20s in a skiing accident. So I was lucky not to be paralysed. But that meant at that time I was studying and I was, used to going out, having fun and all the rest of it, what you do. And I was there lying on, literally not being able to move for a long time. But I remember looking out the window and just looking at the trees and looking at the movement of the trees. Just, it did give you glimmers. And there have been like studies, people getting a lot better from having a view of a tree outside their window. It's literally fact.
It is. Yeah, we used to work with an architect, and the urban design and the park space around hospitals really improved patients' recovery.
Yeah. So nature's all the time wanting to do the best for us, I believe.
I believe that too. Astrid, there's so many more questions that we had planned and that we could talk about, but
Yeah.
we're coming close to our time. I am just speechless at what you've been through, and I'm so grateful that you can share your experience, because I think there'll be people listening to that can relate to every single word. Thank you. It kind of feels wrong to do our regular 10 questions.
I forgot about those.
I know, it's just our fun little feature, and based on the depth of conversation we've had,
That's all right.
it just feels so trivial. But
No, everything's important.
we'll run through it quickly. But on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, how would you rate yourself at being good looking?
That's a hard one, isn't it?
Yeah.
Oh. Well, my mum's Norwegian, and she's always been a person like, don't get big-headed about yourself.
Oh, okay.
It's a very, not that I was, but I think it's in the nature of the Scandinavian, maybe. It gives you that kind of like, just, be a bit understated.
Yeah.
But everybody keeps saying, oh, you look just like your mum, which is so weird because I don't see that.
Okay.
But, my mum's not bad looking. I mean, should I just give myself a 7?
It's one of those questions where it's kind of like 2 questions in one, because you kind of have a feel deep down, and that's great. But then it's like being able to share that, and you'd never want to seem arrogant or anything like that.
But it's beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Absolutely, yeah.
As I've got older, do I feel more comfortable in my skin? Probably yes.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to look after myself. I like exercise and stuff, but you're born with what you're born with, aren't you? And I'm not one to go out and get lots of changes done, but I'm not, there might be people go, God, she could be better if you did this or that. And
it's nonsense, isn't it? I just think as well, it's so much more than how you look. It's the presence you have and the vibe. But yeah, it's a shallow question. How funny are you?
Now, after all that, it's like, you must be a very serious person, but I'm not.
Yeah.
I like a laugh. I have really bad jokes, like probably so cringy that people just go, oh my God, I am that kind of joke person. Like my favourite one when I was like, people just don't get it. It's like, what do you do if you see a spaceman?
What do you do?
Park in it, man.
I appreciate that sort of joke. I don't know what it says about me.
But I think being lighthearted about things is so important.
Yeah.
Break the ice, break down, it's important.
Not take yourself too seriously.
Definitely.
Yeah. Are you good at cooking?
Yeah, I asked my daughter that because she loves cooking now. She's 13. She really loves it. I'd say I'm good. She said, yeah, I like your food. Never, one of these children who go, oh, I hate what mum's cooking. So I'd say a good home cook. My husband's way better than me, though.
Right, brilliant. Yeah. What score would you give yourself?
What score? Yeah, 7.
Okay. Are you good at singing?
Nope. I do like to have like a blaster out in the car kind of session, but I am not going to be any pop star anytime soon. So 5.
Okay. Do you drink alcohol?
I do. Mm-hmm. I would say probably not that, probably never been that, I probably should have not drunk so much when I was younger. I don't think my body tolerates it very well.
Mine doesn't.
So I'm not a good, I don't mind a drink, but my body's nah, it doesn't really suit you.
Yeah, low score?
Maybe 5.
Okay. Yeah. Parenting skills?
Tricky one, isn't it?
It's very contentious.
I asked my daughter again, and she was like, oh, how am I meant to know that? I would say I'm not bad. I would say have a bit of, I said, what would you say is good parenting? And she went, fun. Anything to do with fun. And she's good at reminding me that,
Right.
So it's a good one. But I think, some boundaries. I like to say this Norwegian prayer every night to the children. I've done it as a routine. And it's just like saying thank you for the day and
lovely.
Being thankful, just setting some routines that kind of stick in their mind, and maybe help them further down the line. Have those little chats at night about things.
Totally. We've started doing a gratitude diary with my 5-year-old because I was doing one, and she's like, what are you doing, Mummy? Yeah. And she just writes 1 or 2 things down while I write it for her. Yeah. And it's just like a nice way to end the day.
Yeah. So just dropping things in like that. we like to have a nice family meal, you know, just nice family, quite simple, you know.
So what score would you give yourself?
Would I go 7, 8?
Okay.
Not bad.
Very good. Friends?
Friends, so what was the question?
How good a friend are you on a scale of 1
good
to
a
10?
friend.
Yeah.
I'd say pretty good friend. I'm quite a one-to-one type person. I'm
Okay.
a good listener.
Yeah.
I don't see my friends as much. Like, I've got a lot of friends in London.
Right.
And a lot of them are very career kind of.
Mm.
And I think I miss that because we used to always have those chats. So how's your business going? What you're doing? Help each other out. But I do have lots of nice friends up here as well. Should I give myself an 8?
Excellent. Intelligence?
That's a good one, isn't it?
That's another tough one.
Again, I went through this with my daughter and she went, "You're very good at finding things, Mummy." When that's the intuition kicking in, intuitive intelligence.
Oh, and that's such a good intelligence to have.
Well, if it's a lost teddy, that's like absolutely need to find. It's quite useful. I was actually once scored on like an IQ test. I think it was because I'm dyslexic. I got a test when I was younger.
Oh, okay.
So I had quite high IQ.
Yeah. We had this conversation in a previous podcast, actually, and often people that have dyslexia are really intelligent.
There you go. I would say, I'm going to give myself an 8.
Okay, great. How kind are you?
Kind, I would say kind. I remember once somebody saying, "You're too kind."
Interesting.
And I thought, well, what is too kind? I've got kinder to myself. That's important.
Yes.
So I've got better at that. Not so hard on myself. And kind, generally, I would say I'm pretty kind. Just give it 8.
Lovely. And because of your children, you don't want to answer question 10. That's totally fine. I
I
respect that.
Some things have to remain a little bit mysterious.
Absolutely.
And intimate.
Yes, true. Well, I am just in awe of you, Astrid. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for your questions. And thank you for your open-heartedness. I think you're amazing. I think all of the interviews I've listened to, it's incredible how you draw out and help people kind of, I don't know, with your business, you obviously have a knack and a skill in this kind of the words that you help people, because I don't think I'm very good with words.
Oh, you're amazing.
So I think you're helping me on that.
Oh, that means so much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.